Hello, this is Michelle from East Avenue Art, and today I'm going to show you how I did this fun fall favorites watercolor sketch. So I started with some tracing paper and just a normal sketchbook in the background, and I just kind of started out with just like the cursive of what my kind of plan was, and then from there I used my water bottle here to trace out a nice circle for the first illustration that I'm going to sketch out, which is a pumpkin. And I wanted to have the pumpkin on the plate, so you can see I'm doing that sketch there. And from there I'm going to sketch out a nice oak leaf, and I start with sort of just a straight line in the center, and I kind of do these like wobbly um, little leaf shapes around that just to get the look of an oak leaf. That's a super easy leaf to trace and really fall appropriate. I think later on I decided to do another um, botanical sketch alongside that, but I moved on to my pumpkin. It wouldn't be a pumpkin without fall, that's for sure. So I start out with sort of like an ovally um, shape for my pumpkin, and then I kind of try to give a little bit of a wonkiness to the base of it, and I draw in sort of, what would you call those, like the seams of the pumpkin. And then I place the handle of the pumpkin kind of like not quite at the top, but somewhat like offset from the top. And from here, I just drew the base of a tree and just sort of like a rough outline for the size of the tree. Of course, like fall is so beautiful with the colors, so that is going to be a really fun thing for watercolor to kind of show off watercolor with the blends of the fall leaves on that tree. And then, of course, iconic maple tree leaves. I think I really associate with fall, and you can see how I sketched that out. There's sort of like 5 parts to it. Oops, I guess I didn't sketch that part or record that part very well. So this next part of my process is actually how I decide to transfer my sketch over to the watercolor paper. So you can see everything that I picked is sketched in now: the maple leaf, the little to-go coffee cup, the candle, and the pumpkin spice. And for my money, I think the best thing to do is to just draw it on tracing paper, and then you know, kind of add the pencil onto the back, and then that allows you to transfer it by tracing over it once you get it sort of up onto the watercolor paper. And that's kind of, I think, the best way to get a good sketch down. I erase a lot, so it's helpful for me to get a good sketch while also protecting the integrity of the watercolor paper, because it is 100% cotton. It doesn't take as nicely to an eraser as just regular paper. And here you see I've got my Mungyo 48 pan set of watercolors themselves, and I'm mixing up a lot of very fall colors, so some oranges and some yellows and some reds and browns. I really had fun creating this palette and just getting mentally ready for fall. This project really helped me to do so. So I got some initial colors down on my palette, and I'm using a Craftamo brush to start, and I think this is a size 8 brush, and it's a round brush. And so I'm starting with my lightest color on that tree. So I really think that the yellow trees are super pretty, and they're not as common. So I wanted to have a little bit of yellow with some touches of orange and red in it. But I'm putting down the lightest color, which is yellow, first. And you can see I'm just kind of like dabbing the paint onto the paper, and doing it as kind of randomly as I can. And now I'm just dropping in a little bit of orange at various areas around sort of the edges and then in the center as well. And this is where you have to be kind of like mindful of the water to paint ratio. I wanted this base yellow color to stay, and you can't sort of oversaturate your brush, and you can't have paint or water on the paper that's too wet, because then you'll kind of lose that base color. So you can see I'm dropping in the colors, and it's staying pretty much in the area. It's spreading out naturally somewhat, but it's not taking over all of the yellow. So you can see that range of colors, and there's like some really pretty color blends, which of course we know is like so much of a fall vibe there. So I really enjoyed how this tree turned out. I probably should have stopped just a second ago, but I sometimes have trouble knowing when I want to quit something. Um, but I think I opted to just sort of leave that there and then move on to this maple leaf. And like I was saying earlier, unfortunately, I didn't keep the whole drawing process for this maple leaf going. I think my phone might have cut off on me on that part without me knowing it. And so I like to point out, though, that there's kind of like 5 parts to a maple leaf. And you can see that represented on the bottom, kind of 2 sections of the leaf, and then the top 3 is almost like, I don't know, it's like kind of like the hands making the number 3 sign, I think. And so I wanted to have the same colors as I did with my tree. I envisioned this as like a leaf coming off of that tree below. So you can see again, I started with the yellow as a base, and then I dropped in some more oranges and reds just to kind of give it a little variation. I would have maybe liked to keep it more yellow if I were gonna do it again, but I think it looks like it could have come off of this tree, and that was kind of the goal that I had for that. So here you just see me using my eraser just to kind of take up some of the pencil marks. I don't like a lot of my pencil showing through the watercolor. That's kind of just a preference of mine. I'm trying to decide what to paint next. One problem I often have is that I have a tendency to stick my hand in the paint that I just painted. And some people suggest if you're right-handed to paint left to right, which I think is a really great idea. And it's never something that I think about in the moment when I start with my painting. I think I was just really excited to paint the tree, and so I started right smack dab in the middle like a dumb. And you can see I'm kind of gonna probably continue that foolishness because it looks like I'm working on fixing up the sketch around that candle, the little vanilla candle. And you can see also I painted in the crust of the pumpkin pie, and I wanted to leave that crust to dry because unlike the tree, I don't want to have any blending going on between the crust color and the actual pumpkin color. Oh look, I actually did a smart thing and went to the left side of the painting, and you can see I am painting in the top of the acorn, which is another sort of like iconic fall botanical. I just think acorns are so cute. So I did the top first, and then I ended up doing the bottom part a little bit of a darker brown. So I kind of waited for that, and now you see me adding a little bit more orange, and this is so chaotic, but I moved on to the pumpkin. And I'm just gonna fill in the sketch that I did for the pumpkin, and let that dry before I come back and do like the stem. And from here, I'm going to pick up some of that orange that's similar to the pumpkin to paint in the pumpkin pie. So it makes sense that our pumpkin pie would look sort of similar in color to the pumpkin itself. And again, I'm just doing that in pieces because I think the filling looks slightly different than the top. The top is usually like baked a little bit more. So I don't want those colors to mix, so I'll wait for that to dry. And as you can see, I moved on to the oak leaf. And once again, I'm starting with that like yellow base. And then I'm going to draw in a very light stem and just get a little bit of kind of brown into there so that you see a little bit of the changing of the color, just even from green to like yellow to sort of that brownish that you see. And now that my tree leaves have fully dried, I'm going to go in and add some branches in various places and where you would see that poking through. And that gives it just a little bit of realism. And then I also kind of decided to do a nice olivey green at the base to represent some grass. And I even dropped in a little bit of like the oranges and the browns to represent the leaves that might have already fallen. And I just think that looks like super natural and really pretty. I really liked how the grass ended up. And now that my pumpkin's dry, I can go in and paint in that stem. And you can also see I had painted in the little sort of stripes that you see on a pumpkin. Oh, and also I had started on my little candle here. One of the best ways I think to show fire is actually to use white space. You can see like the brightest part of the flame is kind of in the center, and I left that basically white. I didn't really apply too much paint there. And I think that gives it a pretty natural look. So I'm going to wait for that to dry and then go back in and put the wick in at some point. And while I'm doing that, I'm just adding in some more botanicals around my oak leaf and my acorn. And I had also started on my little pumpkin spice. And you can see I put a little pumpkin on there and wrote spice. And I finished up the pumpkin top there at the top of the pie. You can see it's a little bit darker, like I said. And somehow I missed painting entirely the to-go coffee. But you can see I just kind of did a little bit of a gray for the coffee cup, and then for an orange and kind of a brown for the sleeve and the lid. And one thing I sort of decided was missing from my illustration was some inking. I do like, for illustrations like this, to bring in my pen, and I'm using a Pigma Micron, and those are really great pens to use because they're actually archival. They're also I'm trying to find the word. They can't be smudged, and they're waterproof, is the word that I'm looking for. And so even if you had a little bit sort of like a paint that you wanted to add after the fact, they won't smudge from the water. So they're really great pens to use in conjunction with watercolor. And I like them a lot for that. And here is my final composition. I think it turned out really cute, and you can go to my Patreon to get the sketch for these. And please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Thanks so much for watching.